And I'm going to record it one more time for the students at home, and also for first period, there's about 15 minutes that they need to catch up on based on today's events, or the events rather of Wednesday, and everything that's transpiring yesterday and today. Here's the situation, and I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with you, in that when you guys were in class just on Wednesday, what we didn't know is at the time we were meeting as a group, um, something terrible was just barely unfolding in the nation's capital. Now, that microphone in that room, can we get that turned off?
Which one?
I don't know, but I'm hearing a lot of talking in the background.
I'll just close the door. It might be really fast.
Yeah, that came in and out last period, and I'm hearing like a phone conversation or something. It's
Yeah, I don't hear anything.
okay, cool. All right, so listen, this is my last chance to get this recording right, so let's see if we can do it. But here's the situation, right? As you guys were leaving class, within 20 minutes, it was on every news station around the world that a violent mob had gone down to the Capitol building, our sacred Capitol building, the home of our democracy, and had invaded it and had taken it over and occupied it. 5 people lay dead. It is one of the most important events in all of American history. And so the next day, we gave a lecture, and I've been doing updates and so on. And what I need to do right now with you guys is just to get you caught up on the story. And also, I'm re-recording this because so much has happened in the next 2 days that followed, in the next 48 hours, that the story keeps changing. And one thing from experience, I remember back when President Nixon was about to be impeached, removed from office, that was a slow moving story. It went on for months and months and months. And then all of a sudden, there was the release of a tape called the Smoking Gun tape. And then events started to go at rapid speed. They started to happen one right after another, like a series of dominoes falling. And before you know it, the president had resigned, and he was on a helicopter heading toward his home in California. And I just sensed that that was going to happen here. So in that email I sent out, I said, stay tuned, right? So we're going to catch you up on all those details. But first of all, let's make sure we understand how the grades are going to come, because the first grades will go in the roll book on Sunday night. You guys all know where the website is, right? No problem there. And you'll see in SIS, there'll be a little code by every assignment. Now, here's the deal. We have 2 hours of lecture, and then we have 3 assignments, roughly 5 hours of work. I build all 3 assignments for the week into the same study guide. So you might not even know you're switching from one assignment to the next. If you do them completely, you'll get full credit in each category. There's one automatic category, it's participation. So lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3 participation points, you'll get those automatic 10% of your grade. There'll be some questions you'll see later, which are around the state constitution test. And I call these EX questions, exam questions. That's 20% of your grade. We'll talk more about those later. But then there's notes questions. Like today, I'm going to give you 4 definitions. Well, they're definitely going to be in there. And if you put that in, then those little definition type questions, the little what date did this happen and so on, then that's 10% of your grade. By far the most important, though, are the written portions. Written portions, 30% here for essay questions, 30% here for research and reports. The one you're doing right now, the first assignment is to research about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and to write just a short summary, and that'll go into here. But basically, we're going to have some thought-provoking, your opinion matters type questions, where your opinion does matter. Whatever opinion you have, you get to express yourself. And we had some parents actually suggest a great question last night that we're going to put into the study guide for Monday. But you'll then write your opinion. You can't really get these wrong as long as you meet the word count, and you are basing your opinion with facts to support them. If you do that, you're going to do well. So just start looking for those codes to appear. And I give 3 little assignments per study guide, 1 study guide per week. So 2 lectures, 1 study guide, 3 little activities. Okay, you'll start to see that. You get to pick your own grade. We only get 32 lectures. And with the events that are happening in this 2-week period, Those lectures are disappearing quickly. We normally have 85, so we have time for a midterm, another midterm, and a final. We can't take 3 days out for testing this semester. There's no way. It's impossible. So you get to pick your own grade. Do well on all of your study guides. If you make a mistake on a study guide, all you have to do is go pick that little part where your grade dropped down and just redo that part and resubmit. So you literally can earn the grade you want. All right, now let's get to this important story, one of the most important events in American history, the storming of the Capitol. January 6th, 2021 will be a day that will live in infamy, that we will remember forever. You'll remember this lecture. You'll remember where you were. We'll be talking about it for 100 years. And the metaphor actually worked because here's the thing. I told you we're in the last chapter of the story of the presidency of Donald Trump. No, you're on the last page. And who would have thought that the last page would have so many twists and turns and leave us with one of the biggest cliffhangers you can possibly imagine? So be a little patient. That's why I'm explaining definitions of terms today, so that you can follow the conversation. And within a month, you will know everything there is to know about the vocabulary needed to understand our American political system. Now, I'm actually going to start at the end of the lecture and then come back to the beginning, because what I learned from Nixon is that things happen very quickly sometimes. And this is one of those moments. Since the storming of the Capitol by this mob that just ransacked the place, sent all of the members of the House and Senate fleeing for their lives, the Secret Service had to extract the Vice President and the Speaker of the House and whisk them to safety. And this mob, well, here was the next event. One of the Capitol Hill police officers yesterday died of his wounds that he received trying to keep this mob from taking over. There were only 500 police officers defending the Capitol. And as you can see right here, they pushed right past those barricades despite their best efforts. Then Nancy Pelosi, the day after this event, yesterday, she called for the Vice President of the United States to remove President Trump using a tool called the 25th Amendment. And we'll explain that in a second. And she says, and if you don't, Congress will act and we will impeach President Trump for a second time and then have the Senate vote on that impeachment. And after so many senators' lives, as you're going to see, they were really shaken. They had to literally flee, which should have been the most safe and secure place in the entire country. The White House, the Congress, and the Supreme Court should be the most secure locations in our country. And yet this was completely overrun by a mob. Now, there have been since too, Trump's own people are abandoning him. Key senators that have been totally supportive of him have just said, I've had enough, said Lindsey Graham. You're going to hear the former leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell, and his rejection of Trump trying to change this election. And cabinet official after cabinet official, 2 cabinet members have already resigned, and many of the staffers, people working in the White House in key positions, over what the president started with his speech on the 6th. Then last night, and that's why I sent this little video out, Mr. Trump came out and finally, after 48 hours, condemned the violence and talked about the rule of law and accepted the election results. Now, is it too little too late? Did he do that to protect his own skin because there's mounting pressure for him to leave office now and not even complete his term? I don't know. That's up to you to decide. Because one of the essay questions you're going to have is, what about that speech? I took it as a positive because he's talking about the rule of law, which we believe in, if we believe in the US Constitution. He talked about respecting the results of the election, and he talked about a smooth transition. So for me, it was plus, 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 but some people took offense to that. And I got, he's just trying to escape from what his actions were. He's just trying to save himself. Well, I don't know that, but you're going to have a chance to express your opinion on that. But the tragic loss of this officer, and one of the protesters who was trying to storm into a certain section, secure location. And remember, anybody that breaks any law inside the District of Columbia, the federal District of Columbia, they're violating a federal law. It was a felony to break into this building, right? This group of people, had they stayed behind the barricades, had their protest, done it peacefully, everybody would have gone cool, right? But they didn't. They were violent. And they violently took over the heart of our republic and the heart of our democracy. And one of these brave officers died. There were only 500 on duty protecting the whole thing. So one day later, Speaker of the House calls for the 25th Amendment to be invoked, which would remove President Trump immediately, but it would take Vice President Pence to do it. And if he doesn't do that, she's going to impeach him. And I heard this morning that they're planning on voting articles of impeachment as early as next week. So things are moving quickly. And then what about his cabinet? Here's Elaine Chao. Elaine Chao was the transportation secretary, very important job. She's been loyal to the president, as this guy, her husband. Her husband was the Senate majority leader, the guy that ran the Senate for the last 6 years. And you're going to hear him condemn this, trying to trash the election. And she resigns in protest, along with Betsy DeVos, who's the education secretary, who made a comment that this is a bad example for America's children, and she can't sit there as education secretary and not resign. And then other key people in the administration. And then you have former people that work for Trump, including an attorney general and including his chief of staff, the first one he had, calling for the 25th Amendment, calling for him to be removed from office, members of his own party, Republican senators. So things are happening quickly. And so did the president back down last night in this concession speech? Did he have a change of heart? Or is he just trying to save his own skin? I don't know. But in the morning on the 6th, he gives a speech. You're going to hear it. 62 minutes long, by the way. We're only going to play one segment of it. But this mob took that as maybe license. I don't know. It's going to be for you to decide. Where we left it last time was that there were about 13 reasons I could think of why Joe Biden got 306 electoral votes over President Trump. And the last one is the one that disturbed me the most personally, is that Mr. Trump was not accepting our election results. Vote by mail, for example, he attacked that incessantly. It's the only way we vote in Utah. We voted by mail for almost a decade now. And we do a great job with our elections. And we don't want our elections overturned by a senator from another state saying we shouldn't count Utah's votes. What? And that's really what was going on. When we left, Georgia had just announced that they had elected 2 Democrats to the Senate. This is important for what may happen next in our story, because when these 2 gentlemen won, Warnock and Ossoff, when those 2 guys won, they tipped the balance of power in the Senate. Mitch McConnell loses his leadership role, and it passes to Chuck Schumer, who you're going to hear in a minute. Now, Chuck Schumer, right, is the Democrat and the Republican, and President Trump's a Republican. He's now out. But here's the deal. There's 50-50 now. 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans. So who controls? Well, the tiebreaker is Kamala Harris, the first woman president of the United States, is also the president of the Senate. You're going to hear a speech here where they say, Mr. President, the speaker is talking to the president of the Senate, not Donald Trump, talking to Mike Pence, who's the vice president of the United States, who's presiding over the Senate. And Kamala Harris will have that role, and she casts the deciding vote. So when it comes to bringing to the floor a vote of removal from office of President Trump, that's kind of an important thing that could happen in the next 12 days or even after the election or the inauguration. Here is what's important to know. We have a constitution that sets out the rule of law, and states, of course, have laws that determine how the votes are done in their state, and then they certify those results and give them to the Congress. And those votes are opened on the 6th of January every 4 years, and in a ceremony led by the Vice President of the United States, they read those aloud. This time, there were senators and congressmen in the House, dozens of them on both sides, that were objecting to the results coming from other states other than their own. So we got hung up on Arizona, the first state they read. And while they're going through the process of debating whether or not they should accept those results, and they would, of course, we had domestic intranquility. The Constitution's preamble starts out very simply. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union and establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility, violence had already happened as they're debating. The doors are being smashed in. They don't know that. They're meeting and they don't know that. And all of a sudden, the first thing they knew is the vice president and the Speaker of the House were being taken out of the room quickly by the Secret Service. And then they locked the doors. They tried to protect those people and tried to get every member of the House and the Congress out of the building through underground tunnels to office buildings nearby for their own safety, including their staffers. One brave group of staffers, thankfully, grabbed the electoral votes, which were in two big boxes, and took them with them, or they would have been ransacked by this mob, taken, if you will. At least that's what we assume would have happened, because they were there to stop that vote. Now, once again, if you're a Trump supporter, you listen carefully. I have many friends who are Trump supporters. They would never, never want anything violent to happen. Peace-loving people, they would not be part of this mob. This is a radicalized small faction of people led by groups we now know, like the Proud Boys, white supremacist group, KKK members, radicals. There were Trump supporters who saw when this was going down. They go, I don't want any part of this. This is not why I'm here. I'm here for a peaceable protest, which is totally, totally good. And they walked away. And so don't paint all Trump supporters with this brush. This was a radical faction. And many, it could have been 20,000 Trump supporters that were there. The total could have been 40,000, but maybe 20,000 of them just went home because they weren't going to be part of anything that would break the First Amendment. The First Amendment's clear. It does not allow for violence. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. Most of Trump supporters, no doubt, were there just for that, the peaceful declaration of what they felt people should hear. And then a faction, a small group of insurgents, broke the barriers, broke into the building, took the building over, and caused chaos. The President of the United States spoke before this mob marched toward the Capitol. The road between the White House and the Capitol is called 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, is where the White House is. So it's Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, 4 years ago, though, he took an oath to solemnly swear, he affirms, that he will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and to the best of my ability preserve and protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution mandates that on the 6th of January, we count the votes of the Electoral College in this ceremony. And now he has spoken to a mob of people that is trying to stop that from happening. Is that true? You listen to his words, and there'll be another little essay question on this. And it'll be your opinion, and every opinion matters. But here's what happened. They stormed the ramparts. They got onto the balconies. They got onto the upper levels. Now, even with that, had it stopped there, pushing past the perimeter here, which would have been, to protect the building. But even if they'd gone there and if they'd done this, we probably would have said, well, okay. But when they smashed in the doors, smashed in the windows, stole their way inside, here are as the Secret Service agents, guns drawn, trying to protect the floor of the House, and these House members who are actually now having to don gas masks. Some of them. Here is a veteran of combat. He was 82nd Airborne, I believe, U.S. Army commander in 2 tours. He's trying to defend this poor member. You can't see her face, but she's frightened to death, and he feels he's going to have to fight his way out. And they finally got everybody out. And then this mob just took over some of the most sacred parts of our Capitol and desecrated it. You don't climb up on the statues. There's graffiti. There is trash everywhere. So let's drop back to what happened about 20 minutes after your class ended. This speech had just finished, and I'm going to go to the BBC here. So I want to give kind of an international focus to this, because this was going live around the world, and it has not done our reputation any good. And here is the BBC's take, British Broadcasting Corporation, which is a worldwide organization. This is what the images the world is seeing. Here's the reports they are seeing of our horrible moment.
Events in Washington have taken a violent and tumultuous turn in the past few hours. as thousands of supporters of President Trump stormed the US Capitol building, venting their anger at the victory of Joe Biden in the presidential election. They forced the evacuation and lockdown of Congress itself, where lawmakers were all set to approve the election result. Shortly before the clashes, President Trump had addressed his supporters near the White House, telling them that he would never accept defeat. Within the past hour, President-elect Biden called on Mr. Trump to tell his people to go home, and within minutes, that was indeed the message delivered from the White House. We'll be live on Capitol Hill shortly. First, we'll have this report by our North America editor, John Sopel.
The peaceful transfer of power, the cornerstone of American democracy, seemed a highly abstract concept today, as Trump supporters clashed with police as they tried, and succeeded, to storm the Congress, where America's elected leaders had gathered to certify the election victory of Joe Biden. Earlier, in a rally outside the White House, Donald Trump encouraged his loyal base to fight to overturn the result of this bitterly contested election.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Many of his supporters needing little encouragement to join the fight.
We're here to support, if violence happens, like it happens, but we're not going to start it. We're just here to defend ourselves. Yeah.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm a Mexican immigrant. I support Trump. Freedom is paid for with blood, and tyranny always masquerades itself as safety and security, and that's what we're fighting against right now.
Outside the Capitol, the outer ring of security had been breached. The crowds had taken Donald Trump at his word, and they were taking the fight to the heart of American democracy. They were literally banging on the doors of Congress. And then some Trump supporters managed to get inside. They were armed and wandering the Capitol building. There were tense and violent scenes with police who'll have never dealt with anything like this. These pictures appear to show a woman protester being shot inside the Capitol building. A stretcher was sent in. She was later given CPR. A protester breached the inner sanctum of the chamber. The vice president had to be removed to safety by his Secret Service detail. And then the joint session was adjourned. Earlier, the Republican Senate leader, for so long a loyal lieutenant of the president, turned on him with this withering assessment.
Now, the school board asked us to play this clip for you. And this is the former leader of the Senate, whose wife was the transportation secretary who just resigned, and a loyal supporter of Trump for the last 4 years. But here's what he had to say. And I think these words are very important. In fact, some of the greatest speeches I've ever heard in American history were the speeches that night after the violence was over and they went back to work.
This election were overturned by mere allegations from the losing side, our democracy would enter a death spiral. We'd never see the whole nation accept an election again. Every 4 years would be a scramble for power at any cost.
And the vice president, who's officiating over this joint session and has shown Donald Trump near slavish loyalty, also said it was not his role to overturn the verdict of the people. My oath to support and defend the Constitution constrains me from claiming unilateral authority to decide which electoral votes should be counted. And he went on, the presidency belongs to the people and to them alone. And the president-elect has gone on television to warn that American democracy is under unprecedented assault. And he made this appeal.
I call on President Trump to go on national television now to fulfill his oath and defend the Constitution and demand an end to this siege, to storm the Capitol, to smash windows, to occupy offices, the floor of the United States Senate, rummaging through desks, on the Capitol, on the House of Representatives, threatening the safety of duly elected officials. It's not protest, it's insurrection.
Now, this is, of course, where we have to get to some definitions. And we had quite a little debate over the last 24 hours over the use of some of these words. But what I need to do with you guys is to let you know that words are just words. Words are words that just describe things. And a lot of people attach, meanings to words that, well, they might have a powerful reaction to certain words and whatever. But these are just words. It's just like, saying mitosis or saying, ellipse when you're talking about the orbiting of the Earth. These are just terms that you have to learn, right? That describe the situation. And these are the terms you're hearing over and over again from our elected officials. You just heard the president-elect use the word insurrection. What does that mean? It's an act or an instance of revolting against an established government. That's it. And that's really what this was, an insurrection by a faction of people, a small group of people. Certainly they do not represent all Trump supporters by any means, but they broke in and committed an act of insurrection. It's just a simple term that describes what happened. Others are using this term over and over again, coup or coup d'etat. It's a French term. It's the illegal, unconstitutional seizure of power by a political faction, right? Let me, go back here again and get there. Usually they're military coups or dictators that try to take over countries. But anyway, in our case, it's a faction, and it's the removal of an existing government from power, usually through violent means. They were trying to stop the vote, stop Joe Biden from becoming president. And then many are saying what the president spoke and what you're going to hear next was sedition. Now, again, before we get all upset about the meaning of a word, let's learn what the word means first. Subversion of a constitution and the incitement of discontent toward and the rebellion against the established government. Isn't that exactly what happened? Look, terrorist. This term is being used a lot, domestic terrorists. These are Americans that did this, and they committed an act of terrorism. What does that mean? Well, before we overreact to words, let's learn what the word means. A terrorist, by definition in our laws, is someone who uses fear and violence to push their political ideology or agenda. So these four terms will be, on your study guide, and expect, you just copy and paste them. But if you think about it for a second, this insurrection, it was an insurrection, but wasn't, didn't George Washington lead an insurrection? Didn't Thomas Jefferson talk sedition toward the British Empire? From the British viewpoint, were they viewed as terrorists? Were they trying to commit a coup 240 years ago when we had the American Revolution? Words are just words. They describe what happened. And this description is beyond words. Here is the Confederate battle flag. The last time where the Capitol was in peril was when the Southern armies were sneaking up to take the Capitol. Robert E. Lee's army, this was the flag that was leading that army. The Union Army stopped him, of course. And so this flag never saw its way inside the U.S. Capitol until now. And it's the symbol of slavery, of oppression of people under slavery. It's a symbol of white supremacy. It's a symbol of a white power movement. There's other flags out here, some of them that are symbols, right? Like the yellow flag, it has a, we don't believe in our government kind of a connotation. Anyway, these symbols are important. And I never dreamed we'd see the Confederate flag being paraded through the halls of our US government where Lincoln strolled. And then this guy, he takes over the seat held by Mike Pence, the president of the Senate, the vice president of the United States, and takes a selfie. This guy here, we learned later, was one of the ringleaders. And he invades the office of Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, stole some documents, by the way, and just has this shot taken, all very proud of himself. These are just the terms that these people are using to describe this event. And so having teach you the terms, then you'll understand the speeches just a little bit more. Now, the question for you is this sedition? This is the president's lawyer who also spoke to this crowd before President Trump did. And listen to what he said right here. You ready? Is this sedition? Your call. You get to decide in your essay. Here we go.
Let's Let's have trial by combat.
What? You're telling the crowd, some of which have arms. One guy out in this crowd has Molotov cocktails. We also found pipe bombs that were stashed in the White House. The reason they took 6 hours after they cleared the mob out of the building, the insurgents, they literally had to go through desk by desk, place by place, and look for bombs. Took 6 hours before the House and Senate could return to work. This is Donald Trump Jr., the president of this, the president's son. And here's what he had to say. Is this sedition? You be the judge. Here we go.
You have an opportunity today. You can be a hero or you can be a zero. And the choice is yours, but we are all watching. The whole world is watching, folks. Choose wisely. Because if you just roll over, if you don't fight in the face of glaring irregularities, statistical impossibilities, that's right, guys. That's the message. These guys better fight for Trump. Because if they're not, guess what? I'm going to be in your backyard in a couple of months. Guys like Scott here. Look at, wow. Okay. I can't go through the whole list because I don't have 45 minutes to go through all the patriots that have been fighting, that have been on the ground, that have mobilized to put good Republicans in those positions. Guess what, folks? If you're going to be the zero and not the hero, we're coming for you, and we're going to have a good time doing it.
What? We're coming for you, and we're going to have a good time doing it? And then within an hour, the radical portion of this crowd takes over our Capitol building? Is that sedition? Well, you be the judge. But here's what we do know. The last time our capital was taken over was in the War of 1812. After order was restored, the congressional leaders met together and decided to get back in there and to finish the work of the people, to count those ballots, to certify the election, and Joe Biden the winner. And I heard some of the greatest speeches I've ever heard in American history that night. It was, 6 hours of, riveting speeches. But the best by far, in my opinion, was our own Senator, Mitt Romney. Now, Mitt Romney ran for president, as you know, lost to President Obama. He did a good job in that election, but he fell short. But he is now the senator from from Utah in the United States Senate. And his words will live forever. There was a Roman orator by the name of Cicero, who everybody, the founding fathers, read. His words were just amazing. This is a modern day Cicero right here. And we're going to listen to the Romney speech. He gets a standing ovation in the middle of this. And here's what Romney had to say. You ready?
Today was heartbreaking. And I was shaken to the core as I thought about the people I met in China and Russia and Afghanistan and Iraq and other places who yearn for freedom and who look to this building and these shores as a place of hope. And I saw the images being broadcast around the world, and it breaks my heart. I have 25 grandchildren. Many of them were watching TV, thinking about this building, whether their grandpa was okay. I knew I was okay. I must tell you as well, I was proud to serve with these men and women. This is an extraordinary group of people. I'm proud to be a member of the United States Senate and meet with people of integrity as we do here today. Now we gather due to a selfish man's injured pride and the outrage of supporters who he has deliberately misinformed for the past 2 months and stirred to action this very morning. What happened here today was an insurrection. incited by the President of the United States. Those who choose to continue to support his dangerous gambit by objecting to the results of a legitimate democratic election will forever be seen as being complicit in an unprecedented attack against our democracy. Fairly or not, they'll be remembered for their role in this shameful episode in American history. That will be their legacy. I salute Senator Langford and Loeffler and Braun and Daines, and I'm sure others, who in the light of today's outrage have withdrawn their objection. For any who remain insistent on an audit in order to satisfy the many people who believe that the election was stolen, I'd offer this perspective. No congressional audit is ever going to convince these voters, particularly when the president will continue to say that the election was stolen. The best way we can show respect for the voters who are upset is by telling them the truth.
Now, that was the line of the speech. And it got a standing ovation, as you'll see, because that faction, that group of insurgents who broke into the Capitol building, they're never going to be convinced, no matter what happens. We've counted Georgia 3 times. We counted Arizona twice. We counted Wisconsin twice. How many times do you have to count before they will never accept it? So the best thing we can do is simply tell them the truth and listen to this standing ovation among the 100 senators in the room. There's the vice president, the president of the Senate there.
That's the burden. That's the duty of leadership. The truth is that President-elect Biden won the election. President Trump lost. I've had that experience myself. It's no fun. Scores of courts, the president's own attorney general, state election officials, both Republican and Democrat, have reached that unequivocal decision. And in light of today's sad circumstances, I asked my colleague, do we weigh our own political fortunes more heavily than we weigh the strength of our republic, the strength of our democracy, and the cause of freedom? What's the weight of personal acclaim compared to the weight of conscience? Leader McConnell said that the vote today is the most important in his 36 years of public service. Think of that. Authorizing 2 wars, voting on 2 impeachments. He said that not because the vote reveals something about the election, it's because this vote reveals something about us. I urge my colleagues to move forward with completing the electoral count, to refrain from further objections, and to unanimously affirm the legitimacy of the presidential election. Thank you, Mr. President.
And that right there, I believe, will go down in history as one of the truly great speeches in American history. And I'm proud to say that he's from Utah senator. And I'm also proud to say, and I'll be honest about this, I'm proud to say I voted for him. He's risen to the challenge. And then over the next 6 hours, they went through those electoral votes. There were 2 challenges, and they debated and voted and approved them. And Joe Biden was certified the winner at 2 a.m. in the morning. So they did the job we sent them there to do. And now, of course, there's been a change in terms of the leadership of the Senate. The former leader now is out, and a new leader, Chuck Schumer, is in. And here's what Chuck Schumer said that same evening. And his speech has all those big vocabulary words in it, right? So that's why I taught you those terms, so you could follow the speech successfully. Here we go. Here's Chuck Schumer calling this day, January 6th, 2021, a day which will live in infamy.
Mr. President, it is very, very difficult to put into words what has transpired today. I have never lived through or even imagined an experience like the one we have just witnessed in this Capitol. President Franklin Roosevelt set aside December 7th, 1941, as a day that will live in infamy. Unfortunately, we can now add January 6th, 2021, to that very short list of dates in American history that will live forever in infamy. This temple to democracy was desecrated, its windows smashed, our offices vandalized. The world saw Americans' elected officials hurriedly ushered out because they were in harm's way. The House and Senate floors were places of shelter until the evacuation was ordered, leaving rioters to stalk these hallowed halls. Lawmakers and our staffs, average citizens who love their country, serve it every day, feared for their lives. I understand that one woman was shot and tragically lost her life. We mourn her and feel for her friends and family. These images were projected to the world. Foreign embassies cabled home their home capitals to report the harrowing scenes at the very heart of our democracy. This will be a stain on our country, not so easily washed away. The final, terrible, indelible legacy of the 45th President of the United States, undoubtedly our worst. I want to be very clear. Those who perform these reprehensible acts cannot be called protesters. No, these were rioters and insurrectionists, goons and thugs, domestic terrorists. They do not represent America. They were a few thousand violent extremists who tried to take over the Capitol building and attack our democracy. They must and should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, hopefully by this administration, if not, certainly by the next. They should be provided no leniency. I want to thank the many of the Capitol Hill Police and Secret Service and local police who kept us safe today and worked to clear the Capitol and return it to its rightful owners and its rightful purpose.
No, we didn't know at that point. There were over a dozen officers sent to the hospital, some 60 wounded overall. And we didn't know at this point that one would actually perish from those wounds. So that makes this speech even all the more somber.
I want to thank the leaders, Democrat and Republican, House and Senate. It was Speaker Pelosi, Leader McConnell, Leader McCarthy, and myself who came together and decided that these thugs would not succeed, that we would finish the work of that our Constitution requires us to complete in the very legislative chambers of the House and Senate that were desecrated, but we know always belong to the people and do again tonight. But make no mistake, my friends, today's events did not happen spontaneously. The president who promoted conspiracy theories that motivated these thugs, the president who exhorted them to come to our nation's capital, egged them on. He hardly ever discourages violence and more often encourages it. This president bears a great deal of the blame. This mob was in good part President Trump's doing, incited by his words, his lies. This violence, in good part, his responsibility, his everlasting shame. Today's events certainly would not have happened without him. Now, January 6th will go down as one of the darkest days in recent American history. A final warning to our nation about the consequences of a demagogic president, the people who enable him, the captive media that parrots his lies, and the people who follow him as he attempts to push America to the brink of ruin. As we reconvene tonight, let us remember, in the end, all this mob has really accomplished is to delay our work by a few hours. We will resume our responsibilities now, and we will finish our task tonight. The House and Senate chambers will be restored good as new, and ready for legislating in short order. The counting of the electoral votes is our sacred duty. Democracy's roots in this nation are deep, they're strong, and they will not be undone, ever, by a group of thugs.
Well, there you go. And that's the new leader of the Senate. And then the Speaker of the House yesterday also raised the bar here. And she basically then asked for the removal of the president from office. And we're going to go play that right here. And we're going to explain more on Monday when we listen to the president's speech and we talk about these events. And you're going to, you know, one of the questions will be, should they impeach him? And I'll have a little lecture before you have to answer that question, so to give you a little more context. But here's what she said. And remember, she's the most powerful person in Congress, right? The Speaker of the House. So let's go ahead and listen to Nancy Pelosi.
The President of the United States incited an armed insurrection against America. The gleeful desecration of the U.S. Capitol, which is the temple of our American democracy, and the violence targeting Congress are horrors that will forever stain our nation's history, instigated by the President of the United States. That's why it's such a stain. In calling for this seditious act, President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people. I joined the Senate Democratic leader in calling on the Vice President to remove this president by immediately invoking the 25th Amendment. If the Vice President and Cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment. That is the overwhelming sentiment of my caucus. And the American people, by the way. Justice will be done to those who carried out these acts, which were acts of sedition and acts of cowardice. To those whose purpose was to deter our responsibility, you have failed. You did not divert the Congress from our solemn constitutional purpose to validate the overwhelming election of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as President and Vice President of the United States. Despite the desecration of our Capitol, we upheld in front of the country and the world the bedrock principle that the people are sovereign and that they hold the power to choose their leaders through the ballot. Rejecting this attempted coup on the part of President Trump and his supporters. Accountability is also needed for Republicans in Congress who promoted the extreme conspiracy theories that provoked the violence, encouraged the mob, and who, after desecration of the Capitol, went back to the House floor and continued to push the falsehoods and underpinned this assault, that underpinned this assault on our democracy.
So there may be some members of Congress now who might be censured by the Congress as a result of their actions. We'll see. But as I said, these are events that are unfolding very quickly. And that's why it was so important that I get these updates out to you. Now, what she talked about was the 25th Amendment. Let's go through what that is. First of all, the president takes the oath to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution. But when he's unable to do that duty, the 25th Amendment says that the vice president and majority of the executive leaders, that means basically the cabinet members, if they transmit to the leaders of the Senate and the House a written declaration, the president unable to discharge the duties and powers of the office, the vice president then assumes the powers of the president. And that's what Nancy Pelosi is asking him to do. Now, I don't think he will. Most people don't think he will. So she says, if you don't do that, I will impeach in the House. And then guess what happens then, right? It has to go to the Senate for a vote. And all the senators will have to go on record as to whether or not they supported the president's actions or not. So these are really high stakes for a lot of people who may not want to go on the record. One of the things that we need to know is that here is the Declaration of Independence. And most Americans never read past the first line. We read, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we stop right there. We don't go to the next line, which is the important line, that to secure these rights, to secure our freedoms, liberties, and happiness, governments are instituted among men deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, and that's you and me, that's we the people. And so This is the biggest constitutional crisis I have lived through, and it is going to be the thing we'll be talking about for 100 years in political science and history classes through the history of the Republic. Part 2 of this lecture will be next Monday, and we'll then have a study guide and allow you to express your opinions and your thoughts on all of this. And this is some of the most consequential history that I have ever experienced. Never dreamed the nation's capital would be overrun by a group of thugs. All right, we'll stop right there and let you guys get on with it, and we'll have lunch for yourselves. We'll stop this right now.